Hello, everybody, and welcome to OpenExO Live. Really great to be with you this evening for me, or afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Today we have Len Nanjad with us, and you can see there on the screen, we have some amazing people coming up very soon in the next coming weeks. And as usual, before we bring Len on stage, we did get some of our community members just to share a few words about Len. The first one just comes from Ken Merkel, and he said, Len and I met at EXO World, and it was immediately apparent that he was passionate about making the world a better place. He has a natural ability to bring people together and to focus on what is important. Marite said, I took the EXO coaching certification with Len, and he was an excellent group partner. I learned a lot from him. He is always willing to collaborate and contribute to the team with his experience. If I had the opportunity to team up with him for a project, I would not hesitate. And also from Ben Clayton, who said, I always look forward to working with Len, sharp, insightful, inspiring, and he's doing good, meaningful work. I always learn something and feel better for it. So without further ado, Len, welcome to OpenExO Live. How are you doing this afternoon for you, morning for you?
Yeah, hi, Kevin. Thanks very much for having me here. It's wonderful. I'm doing fantastic today. It is late morning for us, so almost in the midday here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Yeah, doing wonderfully. Great to be here.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, it's really great to have you. And we always start off with asking people a little bit about your background. So tell us about, where you're from, what you've done, and how you came to join the OpenExO community.
Yeah, wow, that's a fantastic story. So let me tell, I guess, a little bit of the Len story and a little bit of the EXO story that comes with that. I was born in Guyana, South America, a small little country neighboring Brazil and Venezuela in South America, but considers itself actually more part of the Caribbean than it does part of South America. But left there fairly young at 3 years old, moved to Toronto, grew up in Toronto, the big city, if you will, in Canada. And then ultimately met a woman from the Calgary area while I was working and traveling overseas in Malaysia, actually. So eventually, we lived in Toronto for a little while, then moved to Toronto. And lived in Toronto for a little while and then moved to Calgary. And during that whole period, it's always been my desire and dream to help leaders and organizations get work done better. And the way that took form was what we would think of as change management, or the dynamics around making change happen. And so as I grew through that and experienced through some of the largest firms in the world as a consultant, IBM, Deloitte, those types of organizations, I also came to realize that the biggest lever for change that I could work with happened to be around organizational structures and designs. And it was really about systems and the design of human systems. So today I would consider myself a designer of human systems that help high impact happen. And, in the spirit of our EXO community, my personal purpose is to bring clarity. And wow, I'm really humbled by the comments from my fellow community members that you've showed at the beginning. But that's kind of what I do. I really just like to find the dots. So first we collect the dots, then connect the dots and get to some clarity of what really matters most. And I guess that's a bit of my superpower. So what that leads to is my own personal MTP. So my massive transformative purpose would be to enable great design of organizations for high impact. And so that's where I sit. If it's about great design and systems that can get change done through people, I'm all over it. And so this is why I love our community. And how I got into it, though, was really just, I think, almost the typical story, Kevin. It was talking about my passion for the world and where it was going and how it could go. And he just said to me, well, you should probably read this book called Exponential Organizations. And I said, sounds tremendously boring. And then he sent it to me. And it literally just turned on lights that were on very low dim into super high focus and super high illumination. So I contacted Salim Ismail, the author, and we had a chat, met him when he came to come Calgary, went to Toronto, met some folks, and even went to just learning more about the community and being part of the community at a meeting in Fort Lauderdale, I believe, Florida. And that for me was when it turned into tribe. Like, I didn't know that people like this existed in the world, let alone, could actually get together and have a common view that united us, but also a way of spreading out that influence into the world. So I'd found tribe in that. And it was really, pre-pandemic days where it was finding tribe really in a physical way, chemical way, that I was there physically with people and learning and sharing. And then that was really seminal. That was about 5 years ago now. And it was just getting involved with different actions, different activities, all of the just being a part of it in some way, shape, and form, and using that to help me shape what I do day to day. So I haven't been subsumed in it, but it's definitely a big part of shaping what I do.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's always quite interesting to sort of hear that story. Did someone read the book first, or did they get told by a community member, hey, you should come and join this community? I do have to say the audiobook of the original book is a little dull, but the content not at all. So Len, I mean, you spoke a little bit about what you do. How do you actually go about doing that? And are you working the OpenExO community sort of into that work?
Yeah, fantastic. It's amazing. It's a little bit of it's very emergent. It's very fluid in a lot of ways. So what my work is, let's start there. If it's not my work, the work that I love doing, that I get passionate about, is helping to get clarity around what is a change and how is the change that you want to see in your company or your community going to shape up, and what do we need to do in terms of organizing steps for that. Sometimes though, and more often, it's about what are the structures that we have to put into place. So organizational structures, roles, responsibilities, relationships that need to exist in order for it to work. And that really, to me, is the system design, the human system design work that I do. And where I do that, I do that with small companies like startups. We're going from 20 people to 200 people. What is that going to look like? I do it with large municipalities. We're 12,000 people and we really need to face the future in a different way. How do we reorganize ourselves to do that? A Southeast Asian bank was trying to reinvent from the ground up a whole new system of their platform, their business model, their consumer model, and their national economy focus model, and just ask for what would be the experience that supports that. Really, that's a big question. Like, where do we start with that? So those are the sort of the kinds of things that I do, and how I do it in terms of involving the community. Sometimes that takes form, like I've definitely gone through the learning side of the community. So taking the foundations, becoming a EXO consultant, and then doing the highly intensive but super rewarding EXO coach certification. I've yet to, Kevin, get my ambassador certification. I should probably do that, because that's where I see I play the best now, like helping out so understand it, come into the community, guiding them through the community, but also bringing to senior leaders sort of knowledge of the EXO attributes and how that means. So I do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of small group kind of facilitation of how you want to make a breakthrough happen. But then we'll do nuts and bolts analysis of your organization and think about the design of it and where we want. And I tend to be less of a consultant, so I bill myself now as a recovering management consultant, and more of a guide that says, look, there's many different ways you can do this, and I in fact don't have the answer, as many consultants might say they do. I have a way to guide you and help you come up with the answers, and we can work that through. So but I do that with my colleagues all across the world through the EXO community. So I've jumped onto advisor calls to help advising on massive transformative purpose or community or autonomy. And autonomy in the EXO attributes is that thing that really translates to how you organize the company, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I play. And then other colleagues, I just connect with a lot of different advisory companies and guides and start to live that sort of global community professional approach. So I don't know if that,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've made me sort of sparked a thought in my mind just around, you mentioned some of the attributes, and you speak about, doing organization design. What attributes, you mentioned autonomy, you mentioned engagement, I think community, MTP, of course. But how do you see those actually in play, in practice? I mean, I believe like autonomy is becoming more and more and more important with time, and Gen Zs and millennials and what Gen Alphas who whatever they're going to be called, who's next. But how are you seeing those attributes in play, and how do you actually go about working with them and organizations?
Yeah, that's you've nailed it right there. So the interesting thing about the human system is that the EXO attributes are all interconnected, and the human system that helps that happen is also all interconnected. But the focal point for me, at least, is that autonomy attribute. And autonomy, like a different word for that might be self-management. So we think about, okay, so if you're going to be more autonomous in the way you operate, you're going to lead more towards self-managing systems in which the individual has more ability to state what they want to do, connect themselves to that action, be held accountable for that work, and manage that all themselves. Now, it's an interesting thing. This is not new. The way to think about autonomy in general is the same way we think about exponential technologies. There is a line that we talk about, the linear growth line and then the exponential line. And there's a point where you cross in the technology from being disappointing to disruptive. I think we're noticing exactly the same thing in the world around autonomous organizations or autonomous structures or self-management practices in all industry. It's been around for decades, like 40, 50 years at a minimum, right? That groups have been coming together and self-managing in ways, but not eliminating organization or accountability. In fact, getting a lot done, right? And not just in high-tech industries. So this is not something that Google invented and now we're all going to become autonomous and follow OKRs and dashboards and all that. No, this has been around for a long, long, long time. All the way, even has roots in sort of spiritual and indigenous cultures. And we're seeing that is now starting to gel and becoming more and more in what we would call common practice of business. And so we're seeing it move from that disappointing for some. Oh, this is just for a very small niche or a fringe of organizations that are kind of those hippies that want to stay out there on the world. And now we're seeing that what we're calling with the Arate initiative as an example, we're calling that the next wave of leadership, that in fact, there is a burgeoning of self-management. And because you're self-managing, it means that you really need to think about why you're there, which is really another word for purpose, right? And then with purpose, you really have to say, well, I need to show up as my whole self, not just my work self. And so that's wholeness of person. So with those three elements, that bridges into another realm of thinking that, not thinking, just organizing and leading, which is coined by Fred Laloux around reinventing organizations. And the term is now being used worldwide called teal leadership or teal organization. And it's really just to embody those three elements as well. But when we link that back to the EXO attributes, we can think of autonomy as being that self-management type of thing. And then, but in order for that to happen, you have to have engagement, not just engagement with your consumers or your customers, but engagement with your with your teams, with your employees. And what does that mean? And it isn't as simple as let's gamify work, let's have dashboards and competitions. It's really about how do we help people develop? How do they grow? How do they have career paths in an autonomous system, right? Like these are still things where people kind of almost get sucked back into the traditional mechanistic world of job descriptions and career ladders and these things, and that can actually hurt an exponential organization in terms of the culture and the growth that they want. Which brings the next piece, which is around experimentation. More and more organizations are learning that they don't have to have a set system for their human system inside, and they can experiment with it. And we've seen that again a lot. The most of the press is from Google doing that and doing those studies. Yet they're becoming more and more popular a way of thinking and working. Well, if we're experimenting with our consumer experience, if we're experimenting with our product and our prototypes, why aren't we experimenting with the way we get work done? Right. And that's happening more and more. So those three things, autonomy, engagement, experimentation, are probably the biggest of them all. Right. But then we broaden it even more into community and as a predecessor for staff on demand. Right. Like we think about so all of these things super intermingle. And that's why I love it. It's so passionate about it because we have all the elements there and we can create organizations to create impact, and ultimately that's why we do it, right? We don't get born to say I just have to have this job. Right?
No, exactly. And so what are you telling leaders what that future of management looks like? Especially the ones that are used to that, that tiered, system of leadership.
Yeah. So number one, it's a little bit emergent for us. Like this is why we're terming it next wave when we talk about it, and when we work with our clients at our RTA initiative, as an example, it's what it is about decoupling yourself from a technology that has become a little bit static and almost disabling. And that technology is called the job description, right? The job description is actually seeped so deeply into the way organizations work. I mean, it is the fundamental basis of the labor movement. You would actually unions would negotiate on the basis of the conditions of work, yet those translate into a job description. And so the job descriptions become static. And now we see all kinds of evidence around, wow, we don't need titles, we don't need job descriptions, we just need circles and models like holacracy, but there's other ones like sociocracy and others, lots of different models of moving accountability around in a fluid way that flies in the face of this technology called the job description. So this next wave is still being in love with the solution, being in love with the problem, not the solution of the job descriptions and, career paths give us. It's being in love with what is the human system that really builds trust. And that fundamental question has not changed, right? Every leader I speak with and every leader we work with is about, there's always a theme of trust. How do we build trust in our way we communicate, in our system, in the way we make decisions, right? All of those elements. And so that's the fundamental, that's the basis of it. What is trust in the system? And if we go back to that first principle, you might have to have a job description in order for there to be trust, right? And so it's things like that we start thinking about and throwing things upside down. So another theme, for example, would be like, I really want to keep my best people. I want to retain people. And that's typically a great goal to have. And my view is, why? Why would you want to retain people? Like if you've done all that you can for them to grow as much as they can to outgrow what it means to still be a part of your organization, either your organization isn't growing in order to retain them, or you're not doing enough to help them go where their purpose takes them next. And so that separation should be a joyful moment. It should not be a moment of loss or grieving, right? And so thinking about that even that way just changes your whole perspective of what your human system is designed to do. It's designed to provide an opportunity for people to grow and for businesses to grow and for them to grow together. So it's an and question. It's an innovation question. It's not an or question, right? And that's kind of the big theme that we try to help combine them. Like you're growing people and you're growing business, or you're even your not-for-profit organization or your government or your city. You're in the business of growing people and the conditions that help people thrive, which is often economic gain or just, profits or some kind of value that's derived. But if you do them together, you're meeting the goal. If you're doing one and then the other, you're sacrificing one for the other. And that would be sort of where we start as a guiding philosophy around how we help you design your human system.
Wow, that's really fantastic, because I mean the sort of organizational structures and the way HR tends to work really, it's not inspiring for a sort of newer breed of organization. So the way you just put that is really great, and actually Kasim on LinkedIn has just said excellent thoughts, and I completely agree. I mean, absolute excellent in the way you framed that. Now, Len, we usually keep these to 25 minutes, and we're pretty much there, which is insane. But I really wanted to ask you, what are you really excited about that's coming next, as we close this out?
Yeah. I'm just so excited about what I'm calling the great connection. So there's a lot of concern about the great return to work or the great reset or the great whatever it is, the great change. And of course, the singularity, which will ultimately come, right?
Yeah.
And so, and for me, that's about the great connection. I think it's about where we're experiencing things is people are becoming very, very more able and willing and permission to be mindful and get to know their personal self. But we're also experiencing structures and technologies and communications that connect people to each other on a broader, bigger, and deeper scale than ever before. So the world becoming more connected than ever before is the precondition to, in my view, a form of world peace, and at least a form of world tension that is about we're all in this together. It's not you against or them against. It's about us with. And that great connection in terms of how we all connect with each other, I see that coming in the horizon in my lifetime and my children's lifetime. And so I'm super excited about how we live in an even more connected world.
Awesome, Len. It's always great chatting to you. Really fantastic to speak to you this evening for me, this afternoon, morning for you. Thanks very much for coming. And any last thoughts that you wanna leave folks with?
Wow! I just gratefulness, really. Kevin, I'm really grateful to have this chance to chat with you. It's often never enough. It goes by too quickly. And that would be my sort of one challenge that I think of myself. How do I help myself transcend time? And we'll leave it with that super big out thought there. But in one day, it's more of your connections, just really to everyone and each other is really the most important thing.
Absolutely. Awesome, Len. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye-bye. So that was Len Nanjad. Awesome to chat to him, and really some exciting stuff there that I say go back and watch that again. Really amazing what gems we have within the OpenExO community. Please remember that next week we do have our next version 2 of Exponential Organizations event happening, so you can check that out. And other than that, we'll see you again here next week.